والله يدعو إلى دار السلام ويهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We're still talking about the Battle of Uhud, and the outcome of the battle at the moment was the apparent defeat of the polytheist army. They were falling in the tens under the swords of the Muslims, and the amount of soldiers they had and the equipment and armor did not suffice to stand in front of the Islamic flood. So they retreated. They forgot their vengeance. They forgot their feelings of hatred and wanting to inflict pain and defeat to the Muslims. All of this was in vain. All what they were thinking of at the moment was their lives. So they retreated in a very fast pace. And the Muslims kept on running behind them and gathering all the booty and the loot they used to leave behind them.
Sheikh, I want to ask you about the place of the Prophet ﷺ and the battle, where he was fighting or was sitting.
The Prophet ﷺ was at the back, surrounded by his companions, because they would never allow him to fight. Though he used to ﷺ fight, but they were so afraid that something might happen to him. So they would always not allow him to fight, and they will always be in front of him, protecting him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Unfortunately, whenever someone falls behind a plan and does against the instructions of the commander, defeat is inevitable. When the archers on the mountain saw the polytheists retreating in defeat, and saw their brothers, the fighters, the Muslims, collecting the booty, they said, it's time for us to go down and collect our own. Their leader, Abdullah ibn Jubayr, said, people, the Prophet's instructions were clear. You are not to leave your posts. Don't disobey the Prophet ﷺ. They did not pay any attention to him. 40 men of the archers went down, and only 9 with Abdullah ibn Jubayr, may Allah be pleased with them all, remained on the mountain. Khalid ibn al-Walid, he saw this opportunity and he took it. He went with his riders and they killed the whole 9 who were on that mountain. And then he shouted at his people, and they recognized his voice, and they knew that he took the rear of the battlefield. So they came back again. And the Muslims were in the middle.
Yeah.
The men of Khalid are descending, and the polytheist army that was retreating is coming back to fight them. They were stuck in the middle. Now, who was closest to Khalid, do you think, from the Muslims?
The Prophet
The Prophet ﷺ, because he was at the back.
Yeah.
So the Prophet ﷺ was among only 9 men. 2 from Quraysh and 7 from the Ansar. And the Prophet had 2 choices. 1, to flee the battlefield to Medina. And that was easy because Khalid was relatively far from him. He still was ahead of time. So he could have done this. But this meant that he would abandon his men to be caught between a rock and a hard place. The second choice was the most dangerous one, and that was to remain, fight, and collect his men around him so that they become a united front once again. And as you may expect, the Prophet ﷺ took the second choice. The Prophet ﷺ called the people, O slaves of Allah, O servants of Allah. Of course, they recognized the Prophet's voice, ﷺ, so they came back. But the polytheists were closer. So they immediately started attacking the Prophet ﷺ. And you have to remember that it was daytime, there were no places to seek shelter with, and you had only 9 men facing 200 plus riders and men and everyone who was just waiting for the right moment, the opportunity to inflict any form of harm on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they surrounded the Prophet alaihi salatu wasallam, and the polytheists attacked this group of 9 or 10 men. The Muslims, meanwhile, were confused because of what's going on. Some of them fled the battlefield and went to Medina. And they were not hypocrites. They were original companions of the Prophet ﷺ, but they were confused. They did not know what to do, and they took the wrong turn. They made the wrong decision. Yet Allah Azza wa Jal, with His mercy, forgave them this mistake they fell in. And among them was Uthman ibn Affan, may Allah be pleased with him, and other prominent companions. Other companions were also confused because the army was from behind and from the front. So they just started killing left, right, and center. And they killed some of the Muslims by mistake. For example, Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman and his father were in the battlefield. Yaman was an old man. And the Muslims, started hitting him and killing him. And Hudayfa is shouting, brothers, it's my father, it's my father. But they could not hear him. They were so confused, they did not understand what was going on. And at the end of the battle, the Prophet ﷺ gave Hudayfa the blood money for his father because he was killed by mistake. And Hudayfa did not accept that. He said, it's for Allah. And this drew him closer to the Prophet ﷺ. Another group of the companions did not know what to do, so they dropped their weapons and they just sat and felt hopeless and helpless. Why? Because some of them cried out that Muhammad ﷺ has been killed. Some of the polytheists cried and shouted to them that the Prophet had died and was killed. So they said, why fight? If our beloved Prophet is dead, then let's die like he died. And they gave up. Another group of the companions wanted to contact Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, the head of the hypocrites. They wanted to go to Medina and talk to him so that he would intercede with Abu Sufyan so that they can leave them alone. They were so confused, they didn't know what to do. Amidst this confusion, there were again acts of bravery that uplifted them back again. Anas ibn Nadr, may Allah be pleased with him, he was the uncle of Anas ibn Malik. Anas ibn Nadr came and said, "Oh Allah, I seek your refuge, and I am not connected to these people who have abandoned fighting at your cause." He met Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, may Allah be pleased with him, and he told Sa'ad, "Oh Sa'ad, I can smell paradise from beyond Uhud." which means that I'm going to die. I want to die. I can feel it. It's so close to me. And he charged to the army until he was killed. And again, this is not suicide. Anas ibn Nadr, he charged to the army and asking and encouraging his people to follow suit. It was reported by Anas ibn Malik, may Allah be pleased with him, that they found his uncle, Anas ibn Nadr, dead, with more than 87 stabs of sword and a stroke of a sword and spear wounds.
Was trying to protect the Prophet ﷺ.
No. It's nothing to do with protecting the Prophet ﷺ. He was on his own, just fighting and charging the enemy army. More than 87, almost 90 wounds, all in his face, in his front body, which meant that he was not giving them his back. Now imagine if someone gets stabbed once, maybe if you're strong enough, you're going to stand and fight. But to be stabbed more than 80 times until you die, he was not beyond recognition. They could not identify him until his sister came and recognized him through his fingers. Only by looking at his fingers and hands, they could tell and say that this was Anas ibn Nadr, may Allah be pleased with him. Also, one of the acts of bravery, Abdullah ibn Haram. And Abdullah ibn Haram was the father of the companion Jabir ibn Abdullah. He reported a lot of the Prophet's saying, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abdullah ibn Haram told his son that I believe that I won't be back from the battle of Uhud, so take care of my daughters. And he charged and fought at the side of Allah until he was killed. His brother-in-law, Amr ibn al-Jamuh, and his son, Khalad ibn Amr, also fought at the side of Allah until they were killed, martyrs at the side of Allah. Amr ibn al-Jamuh, by the way, had a very strong limp, and he was prevented from going in the battle of Badr by his sons. He had 4 grown-up sons, and they told him, don't go out. Why do you want to go out? And you're a sick man, and Allah Azza wa Jal has given you the permission not to go out. So on the battle of Uhud, they tried to prevent him, but he went to the Prophet ﷺ, and he complained. So the Prophet told his sons, let him go, and maybe Allah would honor him with martyrdom. And so this was the case. And his wife, which is the aunt of Jabir ibn Abdullah, lost her husband, her brother, and her son on the same battlefield. I believe we have a break. Stay tuned, and inshallah, we will be right back.
That the translation has been indirectly influenced with the Israelite narrative.
We haven't faced any problems in our preparations.
We can't call it the wise Hajj. In Egypt, you have a huge amount of initiative going on in terms of developing qualifications in different parts of the system.
Reading helps you gain knowledge, but saving the net doesn't help you at all.
They are all welcome to participate in the discussion and the debate about the development of qualifications.
What types of books our children do or should read?
Join me for further discussion of Focus Point.
Huda, a light in every home.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. Other signs of bravery was displayed before the battle. Abdullah ibn Jahsh and Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, both of them were brave fighters of Islam. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was known in Islam that Allah Azza wa Jal would always answer his prayer. So whenever he raised his hand, Allah Azza wa Jal would answer his prayer immediately. And before the battle of Uhud, Abdullah ibn Jahsh and Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas said, listen, why not pray and supplicate to Allah, and each one of us says Ameen to the other, so that Allah Azza wa Jal would answer our prayer. So Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas started. He said, O Allah, I pray to you that on the battle of Uhud, that you make me fight a very strong and brave man. And we have this duel. And at the end of the day, grant me victory and let me kill this man and take all his possessions from armor, shields, swords, and so on. So Abdullah ibn Jahsh said, Ameen. And now it's Abdullah's turn to supplicate. So he raised his hands and said, O Allah, when the time of the battle comes, I pray to you that you give me a very strong and brave warrior, where I fight with him, and we exchange blows, and then let him kill me at the side of Allah, and chop my nose and ear off, so that when I come on the day of judgment, and you ask me, Abdullah, what happened to you? I would say, oh Allah, it happened in your cause.
Subhanallah.
So Sa'd said, Ameen. And they fought. At the end of the battle, Sa'd tells us that he looked amongst the dead, and he found his brother Abdullah ibn Jahsh exactly as he described, with his nose and ear hung in a string. And he said, by Allah, his supplication was far better than mine. Because I did get my armor, I did get to kill the warrior that was against me, but his supplication was far better because now he is in paradise. It was confusion and chaos. Yet, a group of the companions did not give in. They did not surrender. Thabit ibn al-Dahdah, may Allah be pleased with him, among a group of his companions, charged at Khalid ibn al-Walid, because this was the weak point, the weakest link. They went and charged, but Khalid managed to kill them all. But they showed a fight to it. Also, among the acts of bravery, one Muslim from the Ansar was in his blood, dying. And the Muslims passed by him in confusion. And he told them, what are you doing? So they told him, Prophet Muhammad is dead. So he was dying. He told them, so what are you waiting for? Go and fight until you die like he died. And this boosted their morale more and more. Now, as we know, the Prophet ﷺ was among 9 only of his companions. 7 from the Ansar and 2 from the Muhajirin. And they were Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas and Talha ibn Ubaydillah, among the 10 people given the glad tidings from the Prophet ﷺ that they are in paradise. And they were charging, they were attacking the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Utbah ibn Abi Waqqas, the brother of Sa'd, threw the Prophet ﷺ with a stone, and the Prophet fell on his side, and his head was bleeding. There was a wound in it, and one of his teeth broken, and one of the rings of his helmet shield was stuck in his cheek, one or two of them. So he was also bleeding from his cheek. One of the evil enemies of Islam, Abdullah ibn Qami'ah, came from behind the Prophet and hit him with his sword on his shoulder. But because the Prophet was wearing the shield, it did not penetrate that shield, but it affected our Prophet ﷺ 1 whole month afterwards, in pain and agony because of that blow. And Abu Amir al-Fasiq, again, this evil man, he, before the battle of Badr, dug holes and covered it, camouflaged it, so that some of the Muslims would fall in. And the Prophet ﷺ tripped and fell in one of them. and it affected his leg, that he could not walk properly. And the companions fought bravely to protect the Prophet ﷺ. So you can imagine that he was surrounded by so many people wanting to kill him. The 7 of the Ansar were there, willing to sacrifice their lives. So the Prophet said, ﷺ, who would defend us, the remaining, and Allah will make him with me in paradise on the Day of Judgment. This is a reward everybody's waiting for. So one by one, they fought until their death, until the 7 died at the feet of the Prophet ﷺ. There were only Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas and Talha ibn Ubaidillah. Sa'ad was an extremely excellent archer. So the Prophet ﷺ took his arrows and spread them in front of him and said, throw and kill them. May Allah Azza wa Jal make my father and mother for your sake. And this is an Arab expression saying that I give my father and mother for you or for your sake. Just do that. And Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas used to hit, and he used to pinpoint whomever he hits, and always it was a bullseye. Talha ibn Ubaidillah, when the 7 died, the Prophet would prevent him from fighting. And whenever he said, who would fight them and protect us, and Allah will make him with me on the Day of Judgment, Talha wants to go up, but the Prophet tells him, stay. Until the 7 died. And now, he told him, you go and fight. And the hadith says that he fought more bravely than the 10 combined. He fought so hard to the extent that his hand was paralyzed. And some of his fingers were almost torn because of protecting the Prophet ﷺ. He was hiding the Prophet behind him and defending him. He was shielding the Prophet ﷺ with his body. And he had more than 39 wounds. Imagine 39 wounds in your body, and you're still striving, you're still striking, you're still defending and fighting for the sake of the Prophet ﷺ. To the extent that the Prophet said to his companions afterwards, whoever wants to see a martyr walking on earth, let him look at Talha bin Ubaidillah. And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, who's the first Khalifa and the closest to the Prophet ﷺ, said that the Battle of Uhud, that day was all for Talha. Talha was the man. He stood firm with the Prophet ﷺ. And after all of this, Abu Bakr and Abu Ubaidah, Amr ibn Jarrah, managed to reach the Prophet ﷺ. And they started to fight alongside with Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas and Talha ibn Ubaidillah. So now there are 4 of them. And of course, Abu Ubaidah, Amr ibn Jarrah, Umar al-Khattab tells us that he is one that is equal to 1,000 men. And he was a great leader of Muslim expeditions and armies. Abu Ubaidah, Amr ibn al-Jarrah. And they started fighting.
So the Muslims started to sit back again.
Yes, they're trying to regroup.
Yeah.
They're all coming back to the Prophet ﷺ to protect him. They could not could care less about the battle itself. They wanted to protect the Prophet ﷺ because they thought he was dead. And now they have this hope. And Allah described this in the Holy Quran by telling us that they were so depressed because of their loss of the battle that some of them dropped the swords. They gave up. And then Allah gave them another thing to be depressed more, which made the first depression far easier. The second one was that they thought that the Prophet died. So then, khalas, they gave up. If the Prophet has died, then there is no reason for us to continue to live. And then when they knew that the Prophet was alive, they were so happy and joyful that the first depression which was the loss of the battle, did not seem so bad. So they started to regroup around the Prophet ﷺ. Among the first who came back were Abu Dujana. and Mus'ab ibn Umair, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Sahel ibn Hanif, Malik ibn Sinan, the father of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, may Allah be pleased with him, and Hatib ibn Abi Balta'a. And you know Hatib as Umar thought of him to be the traitor on the day of Fath Mecca. And also Abu Talha al-Ansari, and also Amara Nusaybah bint Ka'b. They were all coming back to circle the Prophet ﷺ and to protect him with their own bodies. Abu Talha and Abu Dujana shielded the Prophet ﷺ, and whatever arrows came, it fell on their backs, on their bodies. And Abu Talha was also known with his high voice, and that would terrorize the people when he shouts and screams in them. Hatib ibn Abi Balta'a, Hatib ibn Abi Balta'a, may Allah be pleased with him, himself saw what Utbah ibn Abi Waqqas did to the Prophet ﷺ, and he followed him until he chopped his head off. He chopped his head off. Who do you think was competing with Hatib to kill Utbah?
Abu Dujana?
No, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, his brother. He was anxious to kill his own brother because of what he had done to the Prophet. But Hatib was the first to reach there, and he killed him. Mus'ab, on the other hand, Mus'ab ibn Umair, may Allah be pleased with him, was carrying the flag of the Muslims. They attacked him. They chopped one of his hand, and he held it with the left. They chopped the left, and he held it with his chest to the ground until they killed him. And it went on and on and on. Now, the killer was Abdullah ibn Qami'ah, who attacked the Prophet before ﷺ. And because Mus'ab looked so much like the Prophet ﷺ, he thought that he killed the Prophet, so he shouted that, I killed the Prophet of Allah. And to know what happened next, I'm afraid we have to wait until next time we meet. So until then, fi amanillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.